Hey, Reem.
Hey, Brett. Hey,
Hey, good morning.
good morning.
Hi, surprise. I'm not Brandon, but
I can hardly tell.
Purple.
At least we have some women on the call today.
Right?
well, Brandon's a couple of minutes late, so I'm like getting everyone in, getting everyone prepped, and we'll wait for him until he joins. But how's everyone's week so far? It's Friday.
It's Friday. Yeah, it's been a long week, but a good week. So I'm excited heading into the weekend. How are you guys doing?
Awesome. We're doing good. The weather is amazing. Like the couple of days we had like good weather, so that's good. That's good.
Sunshine always puts a bigger smile on my face.
Yeah, it's very much shiny.
Very ready for the. Yeah.
Hi, everybody.
Hey, Brandon.
So I was already running late. I was headed to James's office to, why is my camera? There it is. I was already running late, heading to James's office. And I got stuck behind a really long train. And I tried logging in off my phone and I couldn't get my phone to connect to my laptop. So it's one of those days, but we'll make the best of it.
I got stuck behind that train yesterday.
Yeah. Yeah, I have been stuck behind a train for years.
I got run over by that train on Wednesday.
Well, you look good for getting run over by a train.
Yeah, I'd say.
Brandon, where'd you get stopped by a train?
I'm in downtown Duluth.
Oh, yeah. Forgot about that.
And I'm at the stoplight, it's red, and then all of a sudden the gates go down. I go, it can't be too long. I mean, I sat there for over 3 minutes, and then I'm like, oh, I guess I'll go look for another way. I'm like, oh, I'll just pull over and connect on my phone. And I wasn't able to connect on my phone. Oh my gosh, people are stupid.
It just popped up on my phone that Adam forgot that he was supposed to pick up his kids at school today.
Oh, well.
So it's just one of those days.
And some note about he's apparently late and don't tell his wife.
Well, I think if he's picking him up at school, his wife works at the school, so he might get busted anyway.
Oh, yeah. He's got no shot.
Yeah. Well, hey, is Bob on? I can't see who's all on.
No.
Okay. So Bob wanted to talk about storytelling, so we could all give him a little bit of crap for making the topic about storytelling and then not showing up. But that'll be fun just to give him a little harassing. But I wanted to hear from you guys because it seemed like in the chat that other people were interested in storytelling as well. What do you guys, if you're looking for anything, what would you guys be looking for from a storytelling perspective? And I've got a few things that I've done and that I would like to share about it, but I'd like to hear from you guys first. Like, what's the draw to storytelling, or how would you see storytelling be valuable to you?
Well, it's the easiest way to make people remember your content, right? If done well. So yeah. I think the better, I think I've inherently like enjoyed and leveraged storytelling, just kind of like el natural, because it's part of like, I think just kind of my personality. But in the past, probably 3 or 4 months, I've definitely put more effort into really trying to appreciate a story arc and, how a real good story is developed. So from my perspective, just continuing to, get feedback about storytelling and, different approaches that are effective is definitely ideal.
By the way, I can see that my camera's on, but I don't think you guys see me, do you?
We do.
Yeah, we see you.
Oh, you do? Okay.
You look great,
Good.
Brandon.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
You're good. It on the thing it says you're off, but you're on.
Yeah, it shows me that I can see me, but it says that I'm not showing my whatever technology. It's a Friday.
It's
Uh,
that day. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's a
Josh.
train's fault.
Butch, what about you? What are your thoughts on it? I know you and I read Storyteller kind of together about a year ago.
Yeah, and a little bit about just coming natural. I've been told that I am a great storyteller talking. Uh, I've got to work on being a better storyteller writing.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, Butch, just because somebody tells you you're a BSer doesn't mean you're a good storyteller.
No, they told me I have great stories. I mean, well, I am a BSer, but I have been told that I tell great stories.
Yeah, you do tell great stories. I didn't mean to put you down in front of everybody.
That's okay.
You do have good stories.
Brandon. I don't listen to anything you say, so it doesn't matter.
Touche. That's
Hey,
good.
Cups.
I'm glad today's a day of building each other up.
Yeah,
Hey,
right.
so I have a question. What's the difference in being able to tell really good stories and then being able to put that into into content, a written story?
Yeah. Well, I think there's, Josh mentioned the word like a story arc.
Yeah.
And I think there's some strategy that goes into story that somebody who's just naturally good, like I think I've been naturally good at telling stories, but it wasn't until I started to dissect the pieces of storytelling for a purpose that I started to realize the power of being able to tell stories. So there is kind of there's a flow. It's kind of like the hero story. Maybe you've
Yep.
heard it from that perspective.
Yeah.
And the arc is I was doing this, and then something happened, and my life became this, which is bad, and it was awful. And then I did X, Y, and Z, and
Yep.
now I'm to this new location. And what happens with that type of arc is you're gaining credibility and you're actually allowing the story to influence and convince people that you're worth following or you're worth paying attention to. So instead of being more, and it taps into more right brain than left brain, because they're letting the story do the selling instead of you doing the selling. And I've always said it's like a story becomes a third person in a conversation. So it's when we're selling, it's like, me to you and you to me. But when you can tell a story, it almost brings in like this third person into the conversation, and you kind of let the story sell them and the emotion behind it, the detail behind it. You let that convince them instead of you trying to go, this is what you should do because
Did Brandon cut off to everybody?
Yeah.
Brandon, if you could hear us, we lost you.
Well, it's just to jump in while he's hopefully reconnecting. I think what I've come to appreciate is like being a natural storyteller. A lot of times is because we have good stories. And the challenge now, as I've come to look at it in the past 3 months, is like, how do I take a client experience? How do I take a client challenge? How do I turn something that's not necessarily an interesting story on the surface, and how do I turn it into an interesting story by really engineering it strategically? And so I've come to follow Donald Miller. He's an author of StoryBrand, and I don't know. I've heard some really good storyteller, like professional, business storytellers. For him, he just connected. Like when I listen to him talk and the structure that he has, I just really have come to enjoy it. He's really big on this concept of like, as business people, we should not be the hero of the story. We want to make our clients the hero of the story. We want to position ourselves as this like noble guide in the process. And he uses Hollywood reference quite frequently. Like Yoda is the guide for Skywalker, right? So that character is who we need to become. And too often what salespeople do is they actually try to position them and their service as the story. And what happens is the client can't relate to that because we haven't positioned them as like the focal point of the story. And that's where I've really started restructuring and really trying to anchor in on what the primary pain point is of a potential client that I'm talking to, and then figure out how to craft a story around getting them out of that pain and into, an elevated state.
I hate to put you on the spot, but I really like what you said there, especially not as the narrator, but as the teacher more than I'm not your guest. I mean, do you have a scenario where you took a message that you would have said this way and you've changed it to this? Again, I don't want to put you on the spot.
No, it's totally fine. I mean, I think I totally do. So I have what I think was a pretty good pitch deck, right? When a client comes in, I do my typical discovery and then I do a pitch deck, but it really was about me. I mean, it was like, look at Propello, look at this value proposition. And so now what I've really done is it's really taking time to kind of develop at the beginning and refocus on them. And so I just met, so we're a marketing agency. We do some retention-based marketing, but a lot of what we do is acquisition. So we help clients go out and find new customers. And the company that I just met with, Meals on Wheels, yesterday in Portland here, they are working with a company that does similar things that we do, but their actual pain is not performance. The pain was like the relationship of the vendor and Meals on Wheels. They just felt like they were kind of kicked to the curb, even though the vendor's doing a reasonable job. The pain, they thought, hey, we want to get more out of our donations. And I think that we can, but the actual pain that they were suffering was there. And so I've refocused around how we communicate effectively. I talked about different check-in strategies. Like for us, we have what's called BDA. So before a campaign starts, during a campaign, and after the campaign, we are doing routine check-in. So like I changed, whereas before I would have been like, the best thing about us is we can get a 2x or a 3x increase with our marketing. I'm just changing it now to focus on what it is and then crafting my supporting data points. There's another guy, Sasha Strauss. That guy he's a brilliant storyteller. But when it comes to me personally, Donald Miller just resonated really well.
Well, funny you should kind of say that, because I'm reading the book Stories That Stick.
Okay.
And she really likes it's Kendra Hall.
Okay.
And he talks about 4 different stories: your value story, your founder's story. There's 2 other stories that right now I can't come right, but and she tells you about, so Michael, you talked about how do you come up with stories, and she talks about how do you come up with stories. So maybe you look at your first, she said, concentrate on nouns. Like Michael, what high school did you go to? Or Michael, what college did you go to? Or Michael, where did you meet your wife? Don't tell us about, you kind of put them in a place or in a noun, and you start talking about first. She that was helpful. And you're right, about telling a story. You kind of start here, you have the problem, then you have kind of how your product or whatever does it, and so now you got a new normal.
Yeah,
that's the way. I mean, so, and like I said, she was easy to listen to. My wife's not big into audiobooks, but she's easy to listen to. So,
and what was her name again?
Kendra, Kindra Hall. Kendra Hall. Stories That Stick.
Thank you.
And so that's, Now, you know, this is just kind of an aside, but before I had this call right here, I had another call with a person. How many of that, all of us ask, hey, what do you do, Brandon? Okay, everybody asks that question. But when I asked the question to Sean, I said, Sean, why do you do that? He was like, Bob, he said, you know, I have a lot of conversations. No one asked me why I do it. He said that, I mean, he was a CEO and he said that, I mean, you could just tell that really resonated with him. Why?
Yeah,
Just kind of an aside.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no, I
for
think that's
sure.
great.
sorry, guys. It is totally a Friday. So you know what happened? My phone shut down. It said the temperature of my iPhone was too high and it had to shut down. Like, you've got to be kidding me. It's like, I don't know, maybe 80 degrees here, but whatever.
You might have to call it a
Alright.
day early, Brandon.
I tell you, well, I got lunch with James, and I don't know, maybe James will talk me into having a beer or 3 or something. I don't know.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Anyway, I don't want to disrupt. Where was the conversation going, or where are you guys at?
I just introduced Donald Miller from StoryBrand. Is kind of like
Yeah.
he's somebody that I've just resonated. Like, I feel like a lot of the things that I was doing inherently, like, it gave me a form to really put better structure around it. And I was telling
Yeah.
Butch that I think natural storytellers in large part are because we have good stories to tell. And the challenge now is, how do you come up with a story
Yeah.
for clients that is just as, crazy and exciting as, the hike that I went on this weekend, right? So it's like,
Yeah.
how do we, and it's using that framework to pull in data points to build that story. So
Yeah, I think that's good. And Josh, you'll appreciate this because this is when we met. I want to share this. There's a couple of things I wanted to talk about today. One is how we use story to sell. And then another one is some things that we can do to get better at telling stories. Those are my main two things that I wanted to talk about today. And then we'll just let the conversation go where it's going to go. And you guys know, look, this is not like my expertise, but I love Donald Miller. I started reading Donald Miller's books before he became Donald Miller. Like, his first book is called Painted Deserts. I think that was his first one. And he just documented his drive from Texas to Portland, Oregon with a buddy in a Volkswagen van type of thing. And I was jealous because for my senior thesis from undergrad, that's exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to get like a big boat of a car, and I wanted to drive across country. I wanted to pick up hitchhikers and hear their stories. I know it's kind of stupid. It ended up not happening. My parents would not allow it. But I just had this concept of going deep and being in different locations. And I even changed and said, well, maybe I won't pick up hitchhikers. I'll just go into these small towns and go into like diners and coffee shops and meet people and engage them in conversation and let them tell me their stories. And then do my senior thesis would be on all these different stories of people that I met and what I've learned from them and how I would apply it to my life and things like that. So Donald is an amazing storyteller, and he's deep. And I think his story, the StoryBrand process, from what I've seen, and I haven't dove deep into it, Josh, mostly because I looked at him like, oh, he kind of follows the hero story, the hero arc.
Yeah.
Is there any more specifics to that other than really just diving into the arc?
I think it's largely the hero's journey, right? It is following that sequence
Yeah.
and just making sure you're positioning yourself as the guide, not the hero. Another big concept that he had that really resonated with me is ideas are like bowling balls. And so when you're talking with a client, you can't give them more than one and expect them to be able to carry it and navigate it, and he says a lot of times we as salespeople, it's like, well, and we have this and we have this.
Yeah.
And now you're asking your
Guilty.
client to carry 3 bowling balls. Is like, that's not practical. And that's been candidly, that's been hard for me, is like,
Mhm.
okay, separate and really keep it and gradually build into, idea 2, but make sure we
Yeah.
thoroughly flush out idea 1 first.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
kind of goes back to what you were telling us earlier when you were changing your story from, whatever it was, 10% better return on your investment or whatever to
Yes,
we're going to
yeah.
communicate through the process with you.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting because you probably do, and I know we do. We can deliver on 5, 6, 10 things for an operation, but what really matters is that is that they're going to happen and we're going to help you get there, right? Or something. There's something message there that says, this peace of mind or this.
And that's
Yeah.
it, Cups. It's like, to me, I was thinking about an insurance agent that I know, and I was like, what do you sell? And he's like, insurance. And I'm like, no, you sell peace of mind.
Yeah.
Right?
Mhm.
Like, that's what people are actually buying. Sure, you may sell it, but like what people want is peace of mind. And so if you change your messaging around that, it
Yeah.
just makes it that much more easy to resonate with them.
Yeah.
Yeah, so let me share this story, and how we use stories in building by design. And Josh, that's when we met, and
Yeah.
we were kind of competitors, different but similar. By design, we just to throw some credibility behind it, we went from launch startup to 18 million in annual revenue in 5 years, and we built the business by telling stories. It was a call center. It was generally a 2 to 3 touch close. Occasionally, there'd be a 1 touch close, but for the most part, it was like 2 to 3 touch. It wasn't that sophisticated, is what I'm getting to. I think fairly relevant for Bob, what you do. I think similar. Cups, I know yours is a much more complicated and much more sophisticated. And I think Josh, you and Butch are kind of somewhere in the middle as well. But the foundation of what we did, I've modeled it. When I'm on my game, I model it. When I'm off my game, I don't model it and I feel it. And it's kind of where we are with Fist Bump right now. That's why I thought the story part was pretty apropos at the time, because I've been going back to where are our stories within Fist Bump. The basic foundation of what we did is we found there were about 7 objections / questions that people always asked. And the lack of sophistication helped a lot. So you guys got to put it where you think it fits within your own businesses. But we called it our 5-second pitch of what we did. And we ended it with, what do you think about that? We ended it with an open-ended question. And then our job was to not say anything. Let that uncomfortable silence get them to speak. And normally they would have a question that was the disguise of an objection. And what we did is we found a customer story for the 7 objections that we heard over and over again. And so we used it as a way to sell them without sounding salesy. We let the story convince them of the value proposition of it. So as an example, they would say something like, oh my gosh, that sounds really cool, but it sounds expensive. Right? Okay, that's a question, but it's really an objection. And we would say, oh yeah, you sound like our customer so-and-so. And one of the ones I remember, because she's still my friend to this day, was Gail. You remember, that sounds like our customer, Gail Hartnett out of Boise. When we first spoke to Gail, her biggest concern was, wow, this seems like a really cool magazine that I get to put my picture on, but it sounds really expensive. And then we'd follow it up with, well, now what Gail experiences is she's averaging a referral every month for a new home buyer or seller, because that magazine sits on her customers' homes for months and months and months. And oftentimes, if they have a family member or a friend over who says, oh, yeah, we're thinking of selling, they actually just pick up the magazine and go, oh, here, call Gail. And Gail's picture's on the front cover. It's a 52-page home and decor magazine that looks impressive. It makes her seem very successful. And so Gail has these referrals. By the way, I told a smaller version of the story when we did it live. I was actually trying to give a little bit more detail to you guys, probably trying to get you guys to carry more than one bowling ball, because that's what I tend to do. But we had a very concise version of that story about how Gail was concerned about price, but we told how it became a referral tool for her and how she was averaging one referral a month because of the value of the magazine. And then we would say, well, what do you think about that? Or how does that resonate with you? Again, it was leading them into another open-ended question. My point of it is, we had a story, as we created all these stories that were real stories from our customers. And I had everybody create their own version of each story. And as we said, they were our back pocket stories. So we knew whenever we heard one of those question objections, we knew which story we were going to pull out of our back pocket. And we just share the story and then ask an open-ended question. What do you think about that? And what I like about that, it's the psychology of letting the outcome of the story is what helps them to see it and get convinced or convince themselves that, oh, I want more referrals. Instead of us taking it from a logical perspective and saying, well, you know, a lot of you know, insurance agents like you guys like to get referrals, and the magazine does a really good job of building referrals for you. Oh, really? How? So it was a way of using the story to get them going down more of just this journey of being told a story instead of being told some logical data points to convince them to be happy with it. I'll pause there. Sorry, it took me a little while to get that out.
And Brandon, I believe getting them talking is what matters, because I believe that people will tell you why they will buy and not even know they've told you why they will buy if you get them talking about themselves. To your point, Josh, it's about them, not us.
Correct.
Yeah, and I think the value of asking that open-ended question and then letting them talk is what you're tapping into there, Butch.
Yeah. And you've got to be willing to be comfortable with the silence.
Yeah, that was in our training. That was the hardest part. That's why I did this all the time with people. You say your 5-second pitch and then you say your quick story and you ask an open-ended question and that was really the key, and letting that uncomfortable silence sit, because most people can't handle the uncomfortable silence. And so they just start talking, and they do it without thinking. And that's where, Butch, I think you're tapping into. They'll tell you what's important to them because they're not guarded anymore.
And my dad was a great salesman, and he used to, he always said there was a point in every sale when the next person that talks is going to determine whether you get the sale or not.
Yeah. Those are awkward times. Cubs,
But you
how are you?
you can learn to be comfortable in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have to
Cubs,
learn to be comfortable in it. Excuse me, I'm sorry.
That's right. Cubs, I'm curious your take on this, because I think in this group, you probably sell the most sophisticated service that at least the people that are on today. How do you use story, or can you? I would imagine a lot of your buyers are a little bit more left-brained.
You know, I was thinking about that. I was actually multitasking and working on a slide of an ROI analysis I have to do later today. And um, I just think naturally what I've done is take customer snippets and embed that in the way that I demo the product or
Mhm.
the product. So, I mean, the complexity of our stuff is there's just so much fucking data. Excuse my language. There's just so much data that you show that to people and they don't even know what they're looking at. So I have to pinpoint a particular data point and say, you know, this is relevant to you because, you know, at Humana, it identified a training opportunity that saved them $300 million or whatever, you know, and so that's what I've had to do. I know that when I don't know that I've got it down to a science, but I know when I do that, I get better response than when I just demo the product and they see a bunch of dashboards and data that's just coming at them. And we've done a really good job in our product in the last couple year, I'd say, in narrowing it down to 5 key metrics. So all the other data is there from thousands of people working at Humana or Elevance or whatever. But those 5 key metrics, if I can get an executive to just focus on those 5 things, and I call them the fly by 5. You want to look at this once a day, once a week, whatever your cadence is for how involved you are in the operation.
Mhm.
And if it's going up, it's good. If it's going down, it's bad. If it's staying the same, carry on, you know, that kind of thing. And so it's really, for me, it's about simplifying that message and then relating it to a direct outcome. You know, in this particular thing I'm preparing today, it's this gets a little technical, but I'll tell it. So we did an analysis in a call center, and in 28 days, we saw 177 apps being used. And you know, on a particular call, if the person that uses 8 apps or less, the call ends in 30 seconds. If they use 8 apps or more, it goes up to 1 minute and 46 seconds. So that's that metric. So I don't really want to go into that with the customer, but I'm going to tell them that 4.6 times talk time is happening in your call center. When you multiply that times 3,000 call center agents, what's that do to your metrics, right? So, and
Yeah. And what's your take on that? Would telling, like, there's a story that you could tell there, and there's 2
Yep.
stories, right? Okay, so let's take Bobby, and Bobby's on a call, and Bobby does this and this and this and this, and then and it ends up being 1 minute and 40 seconds. And let's take Sally over here, and she does this and uses these tool, and her ends up being that. Like, you could tell that as a story and get them to that aha moment on their own of I think this is what you're saying. Fewer apps gives less time, and less time is ultimately the goal, I'm assuming.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
shorter calls mean you can handle more calls with fewer people.
Right.
And so, yeah, so the story for me is not necessarily, I mean, the outcome that I need is that they realize they don't have that kind of visibility into their enterprise. And if I can give them that,
Mhm.
then I can't tell them to coach their people differently. You know, I mean, we can
Yeah.
say that, but the thing that I can give them is the insight to use that time however they choose to, right? So
Yeah.
so what I'm trying to do in this slide deck is actually make it where they see where the opportunity is, but I'm an enabler to that opportunity, right? Because we're
Yes.
not coaches
Mhm.
that we go out and
Yeah.
sit down with Bobby and say, why did you click there? Why did you click there? Why did you click there? That's not what we do. What we do is give them that enlightenment to say, now go do your thing, right?
And I think the way that
Yeah.
you said it, as far as like shorter call volume equals less people needed to manage the calls, right? Like that's the payoff right there. That's the money line.
Yeah, exactly. And
But that's
so
not
the
a story.
but the
It's-
story that I tell is we did this for Molina Healthcare and it did this, right? And
Mhm.
what I try to do is say, if you're faced with this problem, you know, we've solved it before, right? And this
Yeah.
is how we solved it. And so I don't know if that's a good story, but that's how I get there.
Yeah.
Right.
No, I appreciate that. And I just thought of this. So a couple days ago, or maybe it was even yesterday, I can't remember. So we're doing a bunch of videos for Seth's company for Competitive Solutions. We did an event. They had an event, and I went and did interviews with their users at the event. Very organic, social media friendly videos. where I interview people, and I've been doing a lot of research and studying and getting better at interviews. Like I'm going out to California next week for a client. I'll be in their booth and out and around in the event doing these interviews. So I've been studying this and paying attention to it. Like I had one the other day in the digital studio for Seth with the woman named Carla O'Neill. And one of the things she was saying about Seth's software, about Visuant, is this intangible, huge benefit that when I heard it, I said, oh, that's interesting. Can you give me an example? And the reason I asked for the example is I wanted her to tell a story, because I wanted her testimonial voice not to be, well, we use it because it does this. And then what she said was, one of the things that we found with the software, because they've got I love that Shane, the CEO of their company, says they have thoughtware and then they have software. So they have this process business leadership strategy system that they call their thoughtware. And then they have the Visuant software that leads them. And it's a lot of the data driven that leads their meetings and things like that. But she had said almost kind of flippantly, she goes, yeah, one of the things I've noticed with Visuant too is she said, it actually helps our employee retention, because we've had some people that left the company thinking that it was, grass is greener on the other side. And when they found how disorganized companies were and how chaotic meetings can be and how they just didn't know what the expectations were, they actually came back and wanted to come back into Braceway and be part of the company again. And what I heard, I'm like, man, that is a huge benefit for Seth's company that they probably don't talk about a lot. And so I said, oh, wow, Carla, that's really interesting. Can you give me an example of that? Can you tell me a story about that? She goes, oh yeah. So, and she starts telling me, said, so-and-so, she had this job offer, and now she's back and this is what she does. I said, oh, that's really cool. I said, do you have another one by any chance? She's like, oh yeah. And she told, and now I've got these stories from a client that's explaining what happened in story form, instead of us going, hey, you know what? Visuant software helps client retention, or it helps customer, what do you call them? Employee retention. You go, oh, okay, you just it helps with employee retention. What does that mean? But her story, I think, is really tugs into the emotions of it and helps you visualize and see really what that value proposition is.
Yeah. I've used a story like that for years, that I learned at one of our customers that they had a performance issue and they put a lady on a performance plan. But once we gave them visibility, they realized they had a training problem, not a performance problem. So I've used that over and over, and that feels good to the customer. It feels good. Like, hey, we may have people struggling out there. And even though they're not necessarily buying our solution, that people buy our solutions to increase performance, right? That's what they do. But when they hear a story that says, maybe we've got people that could perform if we do our job better, so it relates it back to them. And I get more positive reaction from that story than I do from telling them about how, so-and-so increased productivity by 12%, right? So,
yeah. How, Cubs, do you mind sharing, how do you tell that story? You don't say it as kind of quick and to the point as you just did right there, do you?
No, I usually tell it in this, as I'm illustrating some data. Whatever that data, there's several ways, whether it's in a demo or a slide or a discussion, when I'm describing what kind of data they're going to get, which is a very boring thing to talk about, right? I say, and this data is powerful because of, and then I go into the story, an example, right? And I try to do that a lot, because we, like I said earlier, we're so data rich that we can be information poor. So I just try to put a little story to the data. So, and I think they do remember the data more, ironically, just when you can see a visual of something and then you relate it, oh, that's a training opportunity. And they kind of put those things together. And there's probably some science to it that I don't know, but there's.
Yeah. A little bit of that science, and I'm not an expert at it, but when I started doing more speaking, and I started, in fact, the TED book, the TED Talk book goes into this, is that shifting the brain, like the way the brain is working every 2.5 minutes at the most, helps people feel like they're getting more information, they're getting more value from the information, and it helps them retain it longer. So it taps into a little bit of the logical and the emotional side. So if you're going down that, even, and I think that was pretty consistent across different personality types, but just having that pattern interrupt about every 2.5 minutes helps people feel better about what they're hearing and retain it better. And in the TEDx book, it's like they all got higher marks. They got higher feedback from the people that had that pretty consistently throughout their 18-minute talk.
Yeah. Yeah. And by the way, I don't know your name, sir. I apologize. It says the Catalyst board on your
Oh,
profile.
that's Bob.
Yeah. Bob was talking about the stories that stick. It made me think about, and Brandon, to your last point, there's a book called Hooked, Hooked, and it's probably better for innovators and product development teams, but it's about designing products that stick, basically, that you become loyal fans of. But when I read it, I was thinking about messaging in that way. Is, how can we talk about it in a way that it becomes almost habitual that they use the product? So.
Yeah, and I think that when I started getting fascinated with stories from selling, I became aware of it because somebody pointed out to me that all the commercials on TV at the time, and this is back in like 2000, but all the commercials were basically stories. It's like, what do you mean? And they explained it, and then I started paying attention. If you look at a lot of the, like, especially the pharmaceutical ads and all that, they tell a story and they take you through the hero's journey. And they talk about what the problem, they're down, like the depression, anxiety ones. It's like, oh, she used to be so vibrant and enjoyed all of her kids, and then depression sucked in, and then they show them all down and tired and frumpy and everything. But then this pill comes along, and all of a sudden they're out playing at the park again with their kids, and it's telling a story. And if we're everywhere we go, we're surrounded by story if we pay attention to it. Bob, you brought the topic up, so I want to let you talk a little bit more.
Well, I appreciate that, Brandon. I mean, you guys have done a great job. I mean, and but I've been concentrating on this a lot more, because it does. We can all remember back when we were kids, stories, and so and so I was when you were when your phone was overheating, I talked to him about, how do you come up with stories? And that's where the stories that stick come in, And she talks about, concentrate on nouns. Like, hey, what was your first this? Or what was your first that? So it kind of really helps bring in, helps resonate with stories. And I really like your idea of having, I wrote down, Brandon, about reaching out and having your 7 different stories. I like that idea. And your 3 touches with stories. Because right now, that's what I'm precisely working on for my CEO peer groups is, stories. Take a CEO that was, looking at selling his business. He came to the Catalyst board, he got a lot of good input, blah, blah, blah. His business is now running smoother, more efficiently, and now he's going to keep it. And I think putting people in a position. Now, one thing I really like, Brandon, that you talked about was, instead of me saying it, having those testimonials from, somebody else to say, hey, I went through this story. I think that is something I need to work on, but I think that really resonates,
Yeah, and I think like the story that you just told about the CEO that wanted to sell it, you say, oh gosh, let me tell you about Joe. When Joe came to me, he was tired, he was frustrated, he was ready to sell his business. He thought that he could just come in and get a little bit of help in cleaning it up so that he could sell it for a better profit. And, the other day when I was talking to Joe, he no longer wants to sell his company. He's got a system in place. It's humming. He's got more time. He's golfing more, whatever it might be, right? He's taking vacations without taking work on him. He's actually took a vacation the other day and didn't turn on his phone the entire time, like something like that, where you're you're casting the vision of what the person you're talking to wants in their life. Like every entrepreneur wants to be able to go on a vacation, pay for it ahead of time and not have to turn their phone on or respond to email or answer anything from the office because it's running like a smooth machine. And if you frame it that way, you're giving an infomercial for who you are and what your coaching does, but you're doing it through someone else's voice by just telling their story.
So I'm trying to figure out, Brandon, you talked about the 7 objections in your case. So I'm trying to figure out what other, a lot of CEOs are tired, but I'm trying to figure out what other objections or, concerns are on their plate, because those are the stories I want to find.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to figure out the best way to do
Time.
that.
They don't have time. They don't have money. They don't think it's going to work. Those are the 3 key ones.
Okay, I appreciate that. I'd be interested in practicing my stories within the group. I mean, not necessarily this session, don't get me wrong, but if somebody's interested, I'd really be into that. Because
Yeah.
by presenting your story, you presented a lot for it to go. It doesn't need to be perfect, nor do you want it to be perfect. I don't think. I think having some, it has to be genuine, but practicing it, I think would be a big help for me.
Yeah.
So if somebody's out there and says, hey, I'd be into that, please let me know and we'll schedule something.
And I would say when you're ready to, Bob, throw it in the group chat and say, hey, I'm ready with my story. I'd love to practice pitching it. And people will raise their hand. I mean, Cups put it in the other day to see who would be a guest on his show. And I think he probably got like 5 takers.
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
You got it. Well, so a couple of things before we run out of time that I wanted to share too. So the book Storyteller that I read, I picked this up, and I'll be very honest, I'm not as consistent with it as I would like to be. But he says to create a story journal. For me, I did it as an Excel spreadsheet. And the call is there, or the task is take 2 minutes every day. And just towards the end of the day, or even in the morning, thinking about to the day before, which he says isn't ideal because we lose a lot of memory from sleep. But before his thing was have a little journal on your nightstand, and right before you go to bed, jot it down. I do it in an Excel spreadsheet. And I know there's a lot of apps you could use, but so just think of one thing that stood out from the day and jot down the story of it. What happens, he says, is you start thinking in terms of stories. And it's also similar. It may have been what influenced me several years ago with when I talk about from a social media perspective is keep your phone and take pictures of things that you see. And we talked about this yesterday on the webinar. Take pictures of things that you go, I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but there might be that might relate to a social media post I'm going to do later. And then a lot of times I come into my phone and my camera roll, and I just start scrolling through some of the pictures, and I go, oh, like something I was thinking about with this picture, 1 + 1 = 3. I bring them together and turn it into a social post. And the story I told yesterday on the webinar was the sign that I saw on I called it a hike. It was more of like a little nature walk in a park. But there's a sign that said, caution, snake habitat, and has a picture, a little picture of a snake. And it literally stopped me in my shoes. I hate snakes. I hate snakes. Not my thing. Don't like it. Even if you gave me a snake that was totally harmless, had no teeth, had no fangs, wasn't poisonous, here, Brandon, hold it. It's cool. I would not do it. That kind of fear of snakes. I stopped in my tracks because of the sign. The guy I was with is like, oh, I've been walking here for years. They're never around, but I still move forward very cautiously. But I took a picture of it. And then that morning I was going, or a few days later, week later, whatever it was, I was going through my camera roll and I saw that. And I'm like, the day before I had a conversation with the sales leader who said, he's like, I'm moving forward so cautiously because I just don't know what to do. And it was like, ding, 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 brought it together. So I encourage you guys with your stories throughout the day too. And it could be going to Panera and refilling your iced tea when you're out driving around and you see something in the parking lot, like anything like that. Just start writing down your stories. And I think what it starts to do is it'll start training our mind to look for the stories, and it starts training us to share the stories. And I've just found over my lifetime, I think I was naturally kind of a storyteller anyway. Is Butch would probably chirp in and say that I'm just a BSer, but I think I liked the detail and I liked story. But what I found is I refine it and make sure that I'm telling the right story that leads somebody to the right emotion or the right aha moment is really where it's paid off. But in order to do that, we have to have a lot of stories at our disposal. So writing them down and starting to see that, get our
Well, if you
mind
guys don't
looking
mind, I'm
for 'em.
gonna do like a little shameless plug-in. um, on James's podcast, Pushing the Envelope, we had an episode with a guest called Bruce Smith, and he was talking about storytelling because he has a podcast on his own called Consuming Careers. And what he does is he takes his guests to a location of their choosing that is sentimental to them, and they just start talking. And I thought that idea was absolutely incredible because, you know, you have a place that you like to go to, whether it's a park, it's a restaurant, it's a cafe, like whatever it is. And that place is sentimental and it brings out something very natural in your character that you just start talking freely. And I recommend you guys go listen to that episode because he was talking about the power of storytelling when it comes to like authenticity, credibility, and all of these things. So I think it would be really helpful for you guys. And I'm not just saying that because of the plug.
I love it. I talked with him on Tuesday, talked with Bruce. So he's going to come on my show later this month because I love the
That's so
stuff that he's
awesome.
doing. And yeah, so.
Yeah,
Well,
he was an incredible guest. Honestly, that was a very fun episode.
Yeah.
Well, I think I was the third or fourth guest on Bruce's show. So if you want to learn about my story, it might scare you. You may want to drop out of the group if you hear it all. But what Nora said worked. I mean, we sat around my fire pit in my backyard. We had a bourbon, we smoked a cigar, and we had a chat. And he heard my life story.
Yeah.
My entrepreneurial journey, but he really tapped into how my all the crap that I dealt with in my childhood with my dad had influenced my entrepreneurship for the good and for the bad.
Right.
So yeah, Bruce is a great guy.
Yes.
Yeah, that's awesome. Very cool. Yeah, Bruce and I met in the stands of our kids' junior high school. Our daughters were playing volleyball together. And that's how we met.
That's cool.
Years ago. Yeah. So I think writing down our stories, and then I think the other piece, especially bringing it all back to social, is using those stories in our social posts. Letting the stories tell and bringing somebody to a conclusion, whether it's a story that you've observed, like, oh, I was sitting in traffic. Like, I have a story, I've written it down and I haven't done anything with it yet, but I was in Florida several months ago, and I saw this old guy he looked like he should have been like the chillest dude in the world in Florida and everything in his car. And he was going ballistic, pounding his phone and giving the guy the bird and all this stuff over some guy. And we're in traffic, so I pass the guy that's going ballistic, and then I get up next to the guy he's going after, and that guy looked at me and he's laughing like he has no care in the world whatsoever. He's just like, whatever, we're all in traffic, like, chill out. And I wrote it down because of that. He was so pissed and he so didn't care. And this guy looked like he should have been totally chill and he wasn't. I don't know how I'm going to use it, but I wrote that story down. and it's sitting there. But at some point, going through our phones, looking at pictures, going through stories and just catching up, it starts sparking ideas that we can share. Like, oh, that story reminds me of the conversation I had with so-and-so yesterday or the day before. Okay, well, if they cared about that, then other people are going to care about it. We can kind of bring those things together.
Yeah, I'd love the idea, just documenting, and it just gives you an arsenal of ideas when you're struggling, right? That you can just go to the well. So I have a tactical question, and I just want to get back to it real quick. This 2.5 minute thing that you were talking about, as far as TED Talks and the ideas and 2.5, like, is that you should focus, make sure that you're talking on a slide for at least, I shouldn't even say at least, but for 2.5 minutes, like, is it that people talk too short or they go too long?
They go too long.
Okay.
Yeah, people go too long. It's more the pattern interrupt and force the brain to behave differently.
Okay.
So that's where even a simple thing like you pause and ask a question and pause long enough for them to really think about it. Don't just give them the answer. That pattern interrupts because they're listening, they're trying to put it where it belongs in their brain. And then sometimes it's physical too. Sometimes it's like, the Emeril Lagasse thing where you used to say bam is a good example of it, but where it came from didn't have anything to do with it. He used to say bam because his production crew would fall asleep. So he would do it to wake up his own production crew. But it also worked with the audience because it's like you're going through instructions, and then bam, and everybody goes, oh, and it's like shakes you out of it.
Okay, cool.
Hey, Brandon, I don't know if this is a one-on-one discussion or the group might have some great insights, and it could be next week. So I'm having trouble navigating one particular group in a big company, Elevance, and I have found out through LinkedIn that the president of that group is going to be speaking at an event in San Diego. So I now have a plane ticket and a ticket to that event in San Diego.
Mm-hmm.
And so now I've got about a week, and there's an internal app I can use on the conference to reach her. I know she'll know of the company maybe, but there's two risks. One is I'm going 4 places above the people we normally deal with, and 2, I'm going to have just a short window to make an impression on her. If that, and it could be over a coffee if I'm lucky that she'll sit down with me, or it could be standing in a hallway, right? So just looking for thoughts, because I'm only going to this conference because I saw her on LinkedIn that she's speaking at it, right? So I'm just open for coaching and thoughts, and it's fun. It's a fun challenge, but it's one that I could piss off a lot of people that work for her, or I'll be their hero, and she could just say, well, why is this guy even reaching out to me?
Yeah. Reem Noor, I have an idea. Can we, everybody's shaking their head. Let's get Sadala in on it.
We were all thinking
We were saying the same thing.
Yeah. Cups, you're in good hand. Reem's going to take care of you. What we're going to do is we'll get Sadala to do our prospect deep dive research, and we're going to give you like her personality. We're going to look and see if she's been featured on any podcast or written any blogs or featured in the news. And you're going to get, in fact, Nora, you probably have an example of it. Do you want to pull it up? Or?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, sure.
So, Cubs, this is what you and I talked about with the 100 prospects. You'll get this on every one of your 100 prospects.
Yeah.
Well, Reem's doing the work and sending out connection requests and asking for meetings. You'll have this so that when you are on the phone with them, or you're sending them emails, or you happen to just run into her in an elevator in San Diego, you're at least prepared with who she is. Go ahead, Nora.
When she consistently sees me walking behind her.
Yeah. She's either going to call the cops or sign a contract,
exactly.
but
I can't wait to hear how it ends.
So yeah, this is an example of what you're going to receive, Cups. So it's like we call it the ICS report. So it's Insights and Communication Strategy report. So you get all the details about the person, like the prospect details, first name, last name, company name, all of these things. And then you get an overview of what this person does. And then you get the personality and communication strategy, and this is where it's going to help you very much. So you get like how to approach this person, how to talk to them.
Yeah.
Should you be straightforward? Should you be like more friendly? How
Yeah.
to like go in and like make an impression, and how to like sell to them.
Yeah.
Don't do this because you might lose them, and how to finally seal the deal. And then you're gonna get like common topics that you and this person share that you can like use that as a conversation opener and build upon it, like where you want the conversation to eventually go. And then here in the getting attention and stand out part, this is where we include if they were included in a newsletter or a blog, or they were on a podcast, they were on a live show. If
Okay.
we don't find anything, it'll say nothing notable found, but if we do, you'll have it in like bullet points similar to what we have in the common topics above.
Okay. So Reem, I'll send you over her LinkedIn profile. It sounds like is the right place to start. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome.
Good stuff.
I've
Cool.
used some
I'm glad-
of this stuff, like using Crystal Knows in LinkedIn, but I haven't used Crystal Knows in a year or two, so it's some of the similar stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, so it'll be similar. And then some of the stuff that we're doing with AI searches is really where we're trying to find more of the current events. And we tap into Navigator, but it's more current events, podcasts, blog articles, in the news. We'll look for things like big changes in their company that might affect them, that type of stuff to equip you to be able to have conversations that are important to them.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Glad I said it.
I'm glad you did too. Awesome. All righty, guys. I hope this was good. I was nervous coming in because storytelling isn't my expertise, but as I kept thinking about it, it was, it's in the wheelhouse for sure of social.
Agreed.
Cool. All righty,
Awesome.
guys.
Thank you.
Excellent
All right.
choices,
Weekend.
very much. Thank you so much. Have a great
Bye, everybody.
weekend. Bye-bye.